In a galaxy filled with advanced civilizations, humanity had always been seen as an insignificant species. Humans, with their short lifespans, fragile bodies, and lack of powerful abilities, were looked down upon by the more advanced races. However, the humans' true strength lay not in their physical abilities, but in their unyielding spirit and their capacity to adapt and learn. The Cyrethian Empire was one of the most powerful and ancient civilizations in the galaxy. Its people were known for their technological advancements, their psychic abilities, and their cold, calculating nature. They ruled over countless star systems, and their empire had lasted for thousands of years. At the heart of the empire was the royal family, and the Princess Corel was the crown jewel of that family. Corel, however, had a problem. Despite being the heir to the throne, she was infertile. The Cyrethians placed great importance on bloodlines and heirs, and without a child of her own, Corel could not ensure the continuation of the royal family. This made her a failure in the eyes of many, including her own people. The emperor, her father, had long been searching for a solution to this problem. He needed Corel to marry and bear children, ensuring the survival of the Cyrethian bloodline. But the task was not as simple as finding any suitable partner. Corel's marriage had to be strategic, both politically and genetically. The Cyrethian royal family could not risk uniting with just anyone. They needed a partner who could complement Corel's genetics and continue the strength of their empire. It was a delicate matter, and the choice of a marriage partner could either strengthen or weaken the empire's position in the galaxy. Marcus Thorn, a human diplomat, had never dreamed he would be a part of the Cyrethian Empire's royal affairs. He was just a man who had spent his life working in human colonies, negotiating treaties and agreements between various species. He had no idea that his skills in diplomacy would one day lead him to a position where he would be chosen to marry a princess from a galaxy-renowned empire. At first, Marcus had been chosen for his diplomatic abilities. He had helped broker peace between two warring factions in the outer colonies, and his success in negotiating peace had earned him recognition. The Cyrethians, with their cold, logical approach to everything, had seen something in him that others had not. His calm demeanor, his ability to think under pressure, and his ability to navigate complex political landscapes made him an ideal candidate for this strange, unexpected proposal. But Marcus was still a human. He was not a warrior, and he had no psychic powers like the Cyrethians. He was a regular man with a simple life and a strong sense of justice. He had always believed in the idea of doing what was right, even if it meant going against the odds. He never thought that one day he would be thrust into the politics of an empire, especially not one as powerful as the Cyrethian Empire. When Marcus first met Corel, he was struck by her beauty. She was tall, with dark purple hair that flowed like a river of ink, and her eyes shone with the intensity of 1,000 stars. But what struck him more than her beauty was her strength. Corel was not just a princess. She was a ruler, trained from birth to lead an empire, to command armies, and to maintain order in a galaxy that was often chaotic. Despite her outward strength, Marcus could see the sadness in her eyes. She carried the weight of her people's expectations, and she knew that her inability to have children meant that she would never fully be accepted as the true heir to the throne. Her entire life had been defined by this one flaw, and in the eyes of the Cyrethians, that flaw made her less than what she was supposed to be. Corel, on the other hand, had never been interested in a marriage of politics. She had always thought of herself as more than just a vessel for carrying on a bloodline. She had grown up with the knowledge that her infertility meant she would never be able to bear heirs, and that knowledge had haunted her for most of her life. When her father had arranged her marriage to Marcus, she had been both shocked and angry. How could a human, someone so beneath her in every way, be the answer to her problems? But when she met Marcus, things began to change. Marcus was nothing like the Cyrethian men she had known. He was not cold, calculating, or detached. He was warm, understanding, and kind. He listened to her, not as a princess, but as a person. She could see the depth in his eyes, a depth that was unfamiliar to her. For the first time in her life, she felt as though someone truly understood her, and that realization both comforted and terrified her. For Marcus, the situation was no less complicated. At first, he had thought the marriage was nothing more than a political arrangement. He had agreed to marry Corel because it would help maintain peace between the Cyrethians and humans. He had no illusions about what the marriage meant. He was just a human, and he had no place in the grand politics of the Cyrethian Empire. But as he spent more time with Corel, he began to see her as more than just a princess. He saw the woman behind the title, the woman who had been burdened by her own people's expectations. He saw her as someone who was trapped in a world that demanded perfection, someone who had never been allowed to be herself. And he realized that he, too, was not just a diplomat. He was a man who wanted to make a difference, who wanted to help Corel find her own path. Their relationship was not without its challenges. The Cyrethian court was full of intrigue, with nobles and advisors constantly vying for power. Corel was expected to produce an heir quickly, and there was constant pressure on her to fulfill the role that had been assigned to her since birth. Marcus found himself caught between his duties as a husband and his growing feelings for Corel. He wanted to protect her, to help her find peace, but he also knew that his place in this world was tenuous at best. As the days passed, Marcus and Corel's marriage began to take on a life of its own. They slowly started to understand each other, their differences becoming less important as they learned to rely on each other. Despite the political pressure, despite the expectations placed on them, they found comfort in their shared experiences. But they also knew that their marriage was not just a personal matter. It had implications far beyond their own feelings. The entire galaxy was watching, and the fate of the Cyrethian Empire rested on their ability to navigate the treacherous waters of politics and power. Marcus was not just a man. He was a symbol of change, of something unexpected and unknown. And Corel, for all her power and strength, was a woman on the edge, struggling to find her place in a world that had never accepted her. Their union was an unlikely one, a marriage that neither of them had chosen but one that they were both learning to live with. It was a union that held the potential for great change, but also for great danger. The galaxy would soon learn that the power of a human and a Cyrethian princess was not something that could be easily controlled. As Marcus and Corel stood together, looking out over the vast expanse of the galaxy, they both knew that their journey was just beginning. There was much more at stake than their marriage. The future of an empire and perhaps the entire galaxy hung in the balance. And neither of them had any idea just how much their union would ultimately change the course of history. The marriage between Marcus and Corel had always been a political arrangement, a necessary union that both parties had reluctantly accepted. Marcus, a human diplomat, never imagined that his life would be entwined with the fate of the Cyrethian Empire. And Corel, the princess of that empire, never expected to find herself relying on a human to solve the very problems that had plagued her for most of her life. But as time passed, something unexpected began to happen. Their bond, initially built on the shaky foundation of duty, started to grow into something far more complicated. They found themselves drawn to each other in ways neither had anticipated, and with that connection came the discovery of a strange, ancient power that neither understood. It all began on a routine diplomatic mission. Marcus and Corel were sent to the far reaches of Cyrethian space, to an uncharted planet where an old artifact was said to have been discovered. The artifact had been buried deep within the planet's ancient ruins for centuries, and it was rumored to be a key to unlocking untold powers. The Cyrethian Empire had long searched for such artifacts, believing that they held the key to their future dominance. Coriel, as the crown princess, was expected to oversee the mission, while Marcus, as a human diplomat, was tasked with ensuring the peaceful cooperation of all parties involved. They traveled together, surrounded by a small entourage of Cyrethian soldiers and scientists, to unearth the secrets of the artifact. It was just another diplomatic mission, or so they thought. When they arrived at the ruins, they were met with an eerie silence. The planet was isolated, with no signs of life beyond the ancient stone structures. The air was thick with dust, and the ruins themselves looked as though they had not been disturbed for centuries. It was a place lost in time, and as they ventured deeper into the ruins, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The artifact, when they found it, was not what they had expected. It was a large stone slab, etched with symbols that neither Coriel nor Marcus could read. It was surrounded by strange energy, a faint glow that pulsed in the darkness of the ruins. The scientists examined it, but none could understand its purpose. Coriel, always the leader, was the first to approach the artifact. She placed her hand on its surface, and the moment her skin made contact, a strange sensation washed over her. It wasn't just the energy from the artifact. It was as though the stone itself was alive, responding to her touch. The sensation was overwhelming, but before Coriel could pull her hand away, Marcus stepped forward, concerned for her safety. He touched the artifact too. The moment Marcus's fingers brushed the stone, the world seemed to shift. The air grew thick, and the ground beneath them trembled. A bright light erupted from the artifact, enveloping them both in a blinding glow. Marcus and Coriel were thrown backward, landing hard on the cold stone floor. The others scrambled to their feet, but the strange energy seemed to have a hold on them, rendering everyone else motionless, frozen in place by the force of the artifact's power. Coriel and Marcus struggled to rise, the weight of the energy pressing down on them. As they stood, they realized that something was different. Coriel felt it first, a strange warmth spreading through her body, as if the artifact had awoken something deep inside her. But it wasn't just her. Marcus felt it too. The energy was alive within him, flowing through him in a way he had never experienced before. It was as though the artifact had connected their fates in a way they couldn't explain. They stood in silence for a moment, staring at each other, both in awe and fear. The artifact had done something to them, something that neither of them could fully understand. In the days that followed, the changes became more apparent. Marcus began to experience strange, new abilities. At first, they were subtle, a heightened sense of awareness, an ability to read the emotions of those around him, and an uncanny ability to focus his thoughts. But as time went on, the changes grew stronger. He could move objects with his mind, and his senses became sharper than ever before. He could hear whispers from far away, and his thoughts felt clearer, as if the artifact had unlocked something hidden within him. Coriel, too, began to feel the effects of the artifact's power. Her psychic abilities, which had always been strong, began to evolve. She could sense things before they happened, and her control over her powers became more refined. It was as if the artifact had unlocked a deeper level of her abilities, one that she had never imagined possible. The two of them kept their growing powers a secret, knowing that the Cyrethian Empire would never accept such an unexpected turn of events. The Cyrethian people were proud, and they believed their power came from their ancient bloodlines, not from artifacts or foreign influences. Marcus, a human, and Coriel, a Cyrethian, had no place wielding powers that could challenge the very foundations of their empire. But the more Marcus and Coriel experimented with their newfound abilities, the more they realized the magnitude of what they had discovered. The artifact was not just a relic of the past. It was a weapon, a source of power that could reshape the entire galaxy. It was the key to unlocking an ancient force that had been hidden for millennia, a force that could bring about the downfall of empires or the rise of something greater. The bond between Marcus and Corel deepened as they shared in the discovery of this power. They were no longer just a married couple, forced together by political necessity. They were partners in something much bigger, something that neither of them could have anticipated. They had unlocked a power that no one in the galaxy had ever expected, and with that power came the responsibility to use it wisely. But not everyone was blind to the changes happening within the Cyrethian Empire. There were whispers among the royal court, rumors of strange happenings within the palace. The Empire's officials began to notice the subtle shifts in Marcus and Corel's behavior. They had become more confident, more self-assured, and their influence within the Empire was growing. It was only a matter of time before the rest of the galaxy realized that something had changed. As Marcus and Corel trained and honed their abilities, they began to question what the future held. The Empire was no longer the unchallenged ruler of the galaxy. The artifact's power was greater than anything they had ever encountered, and it had the potential to change everything. But at what cost? Could they control the power, or would it destroy them? The pressure mounted as the political landscape began to shift. Corel's position as the heir to the Cyrethian throne was already precarious, and now the power she and Marcus had unlocked made her even more of a target. Her father, the Emperor, grew suspicious, and the Empire's military leaders began to question whether Corel's growing influence was a threat to their own power. In the midst of all this, Marcus and Corel found themselves at a crossroads. They had the power to change the galaxy, to overthrow the corrupt empire and create something new. But was that what they truly wanted? The cost of such a revolution was high, and the stakes were even higher. The future of the galaxy lay in their hands, and they would have to decide whether they would use their power for good or let it consume them. As the days passed, they knew that they were no longer just fighting for their love or for their marriage. They were fighting for the future of an entire galaxy, a future that was uncertain and filled with danger. But one thing was clear. Marcus and Corel had unlocked a power that no one, not even the Cyrethian Empire, had expected. And that power would change everything. The discovery of the artifact had changed everything. What was once a political marriage between a human diplomat and a Cyrethian princess had now evolved into something far more complex. Marcus and Corel had become more than just a married couple bound by duty. They had become the bearers of a power that could alter the course of the galaxy. And with that power came a responsibility they could neither ignore nor escape. As the days passed, their abilities continued to grow. Marcus found that he could now move objects at will, his psychic abilities becoming stronger with each passing moment. He could sense the intentions of others before they spoke, hear the whispers of the wind, and see glimpses of the future. It was as though the artifact had unlocked a hidden potential within him, something that had always been there but had remained dormant until now. Corel, too, had changed. Her abilities, once limited to the telepathy and mind control that were common among the Cyrethian royal family, had expanded in ways she could not have predicted. She could feel the emotions of others, not just in her immediate vicinity, but across vast distances. She could manipulate the very fabric of space, bending it to her will. Her power was unmatched, and it frightened her as much as it amazed her. Together, they formed a bond stronger than any they had ever imagined. It wasn't just a union of two people from different worlds. It was the merging of two souls, both powerful and uncertain, each learning to navigate a new reality. The galaxy that once seemed so vast and unchanging now felt small, as though it were a chessboard on which they were the central pieces. But with their newfound strength came great danger. The Cyrethian Empire, ever watchful of its royal family, had begun to notice the changes in Corel and Marcus. Whispers began to circulate through the corridors of power, rumors that the princess and her human husband had become more than just rulers. They had become threats. And the Cyrethian nobles who had long held power were not about to let that go unnoticed. The emperor, Coral's father, was the first to take action. He had been suspicious of his daughter's marriage to a human from the very beginning. But now, with the increasing reports of Coral and Marcus's growing powers, his suspicions had turned to fear. He knew that if Marcus and Coral grew too strong, they could overthrow him and take control of the entire empire. The thought alone was enough to stir the fires of rebellion in his heart. The emperor called a council of his closest advisors, generals, and officials. The meeting was held in the Grand Palace, a place of opulence and power, where the future of the empire had been decided for centuries. The air was thick with tension as the emperor addressed his council, his voice cold and commanding. "I will not let my empire fall to the whims of a human," he declared. "Marcus and Coral must be stopped before they can do any more damage." The council was divided. Some were loyal to the emperor and saw the power of Marcus and Coral as a threat to the empire's stability. Others, however, saw the potential for change that the couple represented. The debate raged on for hours, but in the end, the emperor made his decision. He would send his most trusted soldiers to capture Marcus and Coral, to bring them before him and eliminate the threat they posed. As the emperor's orders were set into motion, Marcus and Coral were blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. They had been focused on learning to control their powers, experimenting with the abilities the artifact had unlocked within them. They spent their days training, exploring the depths of the power they had unearthed, and beginning to understand what it meant for their future. But one evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, the ground beneath them suddenly shook. The sky above them darkened, and the air grew heavy with the scent of danger. It was a warning they had not anticipated. Coral's senses went on high alert, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Something was wrong. Without warning, a group of Cyrethian soldiers descended upon them, armed with weapons designed to suppress their abilities. The soldiers were fast and efficient, and they knew exactly how to subdue the most powerful of Cyrethian royals. Marcus and Coral fought back, their powers surging as they attempted to defend themselves. But the soldiers were relentless, and they knew that the fate of the empire depended on the capture of the two of them. Coral unleashed her powers, sending a wave of energy through the air that knocked several soldiers to the ground. But the soldiers were prepared. They had been trained to resist the psychic abilities of the royal family, and they fought with determination. Marcus, using his newfound abilities, tried to stop them, but the sheer force of their numbers was overwhelming. As the battle raged on, Marcus and Coral were forced to retreat into the depths of the palace, seeking refuge in the secret corridors known only to the royal family. They ran through the maze-like passages, their hearts pounding in their chests. They could hear the footsteps of the soldiers behind them growing louder with every passing second. Time was running out. "We have to get out of here," Marcus said, his voice strained. "The Empire will never accept us." Coral nodded, her face set in determination. "We can't let them control us. We have to stop them before they take everything." But even as they fled, the realization began to set in. There was no escaping the power of the Empire. The Emperor would stop at nothing to ensure that Marcus and Coral were brought down, and the more they resisted, the more dangerous the situation would become. The couple had always known that their union was a risk, but they had never truly understood the consequences until now. The artifact had given them power, but it had also made them a target. They were no longer just a symbol of change within the empire. They were a threat to its very foundation. In the days that followed, Marcus and Coral found themselves on the run. The emperor's forces hunted them, and every moment was filled with the fear of being discovered. But with each passing day, their powers grew stronger. They learned to control the energy that flowed through them, shaping it into weapons of incredible strength. They began to see the potential they had within themselves, and it became clear that they were no longer simply fighting for their survival. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. But the Emperor was not easily defeated. He sent his most trusted generals to track down Marcus and Corel, using every resource at his disposal to hunt them down. The galaxy itself was beginning to feel the effects of the Empire's instability. Factions within the Cyrethian Empire began to break away, and rebellions sparked in distant colonies. The Empire was on the verge of collapse, and Marcus and Corel knew that they had to act fast if they were to have any chance of survival. The final confrontation came when Marcus and Corel stood before the Emperor in the grand hall of the palace. The air was thick with tension as the two sides prepared for the inevitable battle. The Emperor, surrounded by his generals and advisors, looked down at the couple with a mixture of anger and fear. "You have defied me," the Emperor said, his voice cold and full of contempt. "You have betrayed your own people. You will pay the price for your actions." Marcus and Corel stood side by side, their powers surging as they prepared to face the Emperor's wrath. They knew that this battle would be their last chance to change the future of the galaxy. If they failed, the Empire would crush them, and with it, the hope for a new world. But they were not afraid. They had unlocked a power that no one had ever imagined, and they were ready to fight for the freedom they believed in. The battle that followed was one for the ages. The power of the artifact clashed against the might of the Cyrethian Empire, and the very foundation of the galaxy trembled. In the end, Marcus and Corel emerged victorious, their love and strength overcoming the Emperor's reign of fear. With the Emperor's defeat, the galaxy was forever changed. The Cyrethian Empire, once a symbol of unchallenged power, was no more. Marcus and Corel had unlocked the power to create a new future, one where no empire, no ruler, could ever again dictate the fate of others. They had forged their own path, and in doing so, had changed the course of history. And as they stood together, looking out over a galaxy filled with endless possibilities, they knew that their journey was far from over. The power they had unlocked was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and their story was only just beginning to unfold.